Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on when you're tuning in. My name is Stacy Schuerman, and I am the host of Who Are These Spiritualists on Lilydale Radio. We come to you multiple times a week through numerous hosts, all members of Lilydale Assembly. We come to talk about all things spiritual and based upon spiritualism. It's an exciting time for all of us to learn in our journey. I'm super excited for tonight's guest, Travis the Spiritualist. You'll get to know more about him. I love to interview current day spiritualists, pioneers who are paving the way, keeping the spiritualist movement alive. My show airs the fourth Sunday of every month at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For those of you who have been to Lilydale, you might recognize me. I am owner with my partner, Michelle, of Sacred Grounds Coffee House. I have been a spiritualist for about 16 years. I love the movement of spiritualism and what it means to us as spiritualists and what it does for us. So, and I love interviewing people who are also of the same mindset, but yet maybe different perspectives. So thank you for tuning in, and let's meet Travis. Perfect. Okay. Yeah. Hi. We're back, everybody. I have Travis with me. I have Travis the Spiritualist, actually, with me today. So welcome, Travis, for coming on our show. Who are these spiritualists?
Oh, thank you for asking me.
Absolutely. I have to say, just kind of small worldism. I'm sure most of people who are in their spiritual journey seem to find a lot of coincidences or stuff like that. When I was starting the show, it's been almost a year now that I've been doing this show. And I have a friend of mine, well, he's kind of like family. I call him chosen brother of the heart, Elliot Adams, who is a tarot card author. He said, "You know Travis?" And I'm like, wow, what a small world.
It's a very small world.
Very, very small world. So, Travis, I am just happy to have you on. Like I said, I kind of stalk your social media and I see a lot of your posts about spiritualism and, you being a spiritualist. So, my first question I just want to know about you is, how did you find spiritualism?
So, I found spiritualism in my teens. I'm 35, and back in 2008, I did a television program for A&E, and on that program, if anybody remembers Psychic Kids, like way back in the day, I was one of the kids, and yeah, so usually in each episode, they would bring in a mentor for like a particular theme or issue or whatever. The mentor who came in on my particular episode was a spiritualist, and I continued working with her after we finished filming the show. So up until that point, because I'd already kind of started a psychic journey, I'd heard of like the Fox sisters and things like that, but I didn't have a real understanding of it. And I definitely didn't realize that it was a religion and a whole movement. So as I started working with her, she would talk about growing up in the spiritualist church and how her parents and grandparents were, mediums in the church and all that went with it. So that motivated me to search out a spiritualist church because I wanted to experience it for myself. So I found one. It took a little bit of work in Ohio, but I found one, and I drove really far to attend a service. And I'm just kind of watching because I had no real idea of what to expect. And I'm like, oh, this isn't all that different than the church I grew up in. I grew up Pentecostal. So you walk in and, you got the pews and the pictures. And I'm like, this just looks like any old church. But at the end, the pastor or the president asked, after they did message work, asked if anybody had anything where they could get up. And I don't know what possessed me to do it, but something in me was like, you can do this. So I did. And after that, I was like, oh yeah, I think I found my place.
Oh my God, that is so cool. Like, that is so cool. I always say, Travis, I too, well, you were born with your gifts, right? But you really weren't born into, I wasn't born into spiritualism, but
Yeah.
yet there are generational spiritualists. And I always feel like, well, lucky you to be open
Right?
to that since the beginning, but good for you for finding it, and it is difficult to sometimes find, but no matter where you're listening, I know this is a worldwide show, but no matter where you're listening, the odds that you can find something relating to spiritualism in your area, you might have to drive. It might be the opposite end of the state you're in, but you might be able to find something. Absolutely. So, getting up, standing up, giving those messages, proving that continuity of life, is that what kind of drew you then to keep you? Or I shouldn't say keep you. You choose to define yourself as a spiritualist. So that is us, like people who say we're spiritualists, we're basically saying that we, believe in the science, philosophy, and religion of spiritualism. So what kind of, after that moment, that giving the message, was that the hook, line and sinker you were in?
Well, I continued my work with that teacher for several years, and that also led me places like Lilydale and Camp Chesterfield. And one of the things that really fascinated me, in addition to, I started prior to that TV show and prior to that mentor, I was working psychically, but I always kind of resisted the spirit communication because I wasn't sure that I wanted to deal with. I didn't feel ready for that. But the mediumship kept kind of pulling me, and it sort of became a focus. But also there was just something that I found very fascinating about the history. Going to the grounds, learning the history, the mediums of the past, just the evolution of the movement is so rich and has affected so many aspects of today that people don't realize, from things like, abolitionism and women's suffrage and all of these banking, all this sort of stuff. And I just thought it was absolutely fascinating. And I think that was one of the things that really was just, I don't know, I just got absorbed in it.
Oh, music to my ears. I'm a history buff. Give me articles to read, and
Right?
because it really was such a radical movement at the time. You're looking at 1850s, 1900s, radical thought theories, just radical ideologies, and I loved it. Like, it's just so fascinating to me, and so many people skip over the history. They're like, "Why do we need that?"
Yeah.
But it's super important, and I think it's a great, for me, it almost feels like an energetic incentive to keep going and keep carrying the torch, that kind of stuff. So obviously you've probably had a lot, but I always ask, like, my guests, what kind of aha moments have you had in your experience as a spiritualist?
I would say that there's like two big ones, and I can answer it from like just the perspective of just spiritualism as a whole, and from the perspective of a medium. Um, One of the things that I really resonated with spiritualism, modern spiritualism, is that it's a living religion, in the sense that any other religion, it's like, we believe this because this book says so, and you just got to take our word for it. As to where spiritualism says, this is what we believe. Now let me show you why I believe this, or let me demonstrate.
Mm,
Um, so it really teaches us how to live. If
yeah.
we can, because so much, I think a lot of people who don't know a lot about spiritualism conflate it with just message work, and it's so much more than just message work. If you can take for granted that continuation is factual, well, then that means I have a soul, and that means my soul has a purpose, and it just takes you inward and really makes you reflect and grow. It allows you to grow your spirit. So that was one thing that I thought was very healthy. But from the perspective of a medium, one of the things that people always ask about the afterlife, and while I have no idea all the comings and goings of what goes on over there, the conclusion that I've come to after readings and readings and readings and readings is that I really don't think that side and this side are all that much different.
Wow, that's kind of profound. And I agree with you because so many people have I think just naturally, think about all the movies we've watched where people die, all dogs go to heaven, they're on clouds and there's this, and then, some of the movies, how they portray the afterlife. And then, yet there is such a similarity. There's an energetic similarity. There's a comfort, of the fact that, I think through mediumship, how many, you in your readings, how many times have you heard that, they've met up with old friends or family and they're maybe experiencing or traveling. I mean, it is very similar in reality. Oh, sorry, my dog has decided he wants to ask a question. He's like, what does that world look like? He wants to know. We talked about all dogs go to heaven, and now here again. You know what I mean? And I do want to say, Travis, I am just like astounded. I am so excited. I don't know. I probably look like a kid just smiling because it's great to see somebody. And I don't mean to bring age into this because I think age is nothing but a number. I know people who are 20 who act like they're 80, and I know 80-year-olds who act like they're 20. So age doesn't really matter, but demographically in the human world, spiritualism has started to kind of shrink a little bit. It was always, I'm kind of going on the soapbox a minute but I want to hear this question or this answer that you might have is, before, especially in its movement, it was a time of, families coming together. And it was like, you just kind of fought for a cause, you were there. And over time, I don't want to say it's been shrinking because I don't believe in that. I feel like it's becoming more of, I don't know. It's like there's people who are, you're totally in or you're totally out sometimes is what it seems. But there's a lot of people who kind of, step in it for a little while. It's amazing me to see you so excited, so young. I mean, we're all young, right? But you're young, right? On average, right? On average, you're young for the people you see in this movement. And it's so exciting to see and hear your passion that you have as a spiritualist and how so much it impacts your life, because you really said it best. It's a lifestyle. It's a way of living, And did you get most of your information or education from people, from spirit? How did that kind of, come to be where you're just, because you just sound so into it. You know what I mean? I just feel your energy and you're like, it's just like, wow, that's a lot. So how do you learn? How are you learning this?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I mentioned the one mentor that I had from the television show, and there's two people in my life who I considered like flesh and bone mentors or teachers. She was very much the type of teacher who was not, I'm going to talk at you. She was, this is what I want you to do. Now do it. And you figure it out as you go, which benefited me in a lot of ways. But then I also had, other teachers who were a little bit more traditional too. One of the mediums at Lilydale, Sharon Klingler, I've done a lot with over the years, and she really pushed me in my mediumship. And because everything was so sort of wrapped up in spiritualism and I loved the history so much, I would go back and read all of these things from the 1800s. And I'm the type of person, for someone who's very right-brained, I can also be very left-brained. So like I would see these things and I'd be like, well, this person says this, but this medium says this, and they're both excellent mediums. So now I have to figure out what's true for me. And so I'm always like, I'm a refiner. I like to take all of my sources, and then I like to peel away piece by piece the things that I'm like, okay, I can discard that until I get to like the essence or the core, and then come to my own conclusions. But a lot of it has been books. I mean, I'm a huge book nerd, and I'm a voracious reader. But I've also, just old lectures, and even just taking classes, different philosophy classes, or like I said, I'm very lucky in that I'm equidistant between Lilydale and Camp Chesterfield. And so I can go and sort of get some of their style and their perspective and their philosophy, and then go over here and do the same thing. So
Yeah.
many sources, but because I was in Ohio and because there wasn't a ton here except for like corn, a lot of it had to be through books and stuff like that.
Self-taught,
Yeah.
self-learned. I love what you're saying about, because it's funny. I know I took a sharing class one time, and I started, and again, we all start on our journeys different mentors. And I always say that you need all that. You need to see there's not one medium that I think is exactly the same as another.
Mhm.
There might be similarities,
Mhm.
like I started with Janet Nahovac when I was learning, right? And she was like, whoa, due diligence, like evidence, 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 evidence. And then I took Sharon's class one year in Lilydale, and I'm like, what? I got to go to Spirit? What? Like totally different, like you said, totally different types of mediumship, both really great mediums. But really, you really hit the nail on the head when you're developing not even just like mediumship with giving readings, because like you said, spiritualism is huge. There's so many things, the science, the philosophy, there's all different types of mediumship. There's so many different routes you can take. But ultimately, spiritualism gives you that personal responsibility of finding your own truth, seeking your own truth, finding your own path, and not, following or emulating or trying to be someone else. Be yourself, and everything else will fall in line.
Well, and that to me too is one of the big things that I really loved um, as I was coming into spiritualism was with the philosophy and with the tenets, the emphasis on personal responsibility.
Yeah.
Being that I grew up Pentecostal, everything was either this is God favoring you or this is the devil attacking you. And I'm like, maybe I just made a choice, and natural law says A plus B equals C. And I can't blame anybody for anything except I'm only responsible for me. And I really love that. Like to me, that was one of the pivotal principles that really was like, I dig this.
That is such an empowering principle to me too, because then what it also made me realize is that I have choices. I am never stuck in a corner. I am never defenseless. I am, or powerless. I am powerful. I have my own personal power. Love that. Love that. Oh my gosh. I know. All right. I know. I could probably talk to you for hours and hours and hours, but I do have to watch the time and all that kind of stuff, and respect yours. So let me ask you, since you do love history so much,
Mhm.
what pioneers, what pave makers of the past kind of stand out for you that you really resonate with?
Okay, so um, it's so interesting being that there's not a lot in Ohio because Ohio actually used to be really rich in spiritualist history. So where I live, just down the road, maybe 3 or 4 miles, is the hometown and the resting place of Hudson Tuttle, who was he and his wife were very prominent spiritualists and writers, and so I've always kind of felt a connection to the Tuttles, being that they're just like right there. Um, and so that was someone who I found very interesting. And then also down near Athens, Ohio, there was Jonathan Coons, who was sort of a big deal within the physical mediumship realm when that was all sort of starting out and blossoming in the 1800s. Outside of that, I really find from history in the UK, Estelle Roberts is probably one of my favorite mediums. And I love the versatility of her mediumship. And then I've learned a ton from, even though he's been dead for ages, you can find so hours worth of recordings of the teachings and philosophy of Gordon Higginson.
Oh,
And one of the things that I really admire about Gordon is he had a charisma. He could captivate you in his words. And people like Mavis Patilla, who was one of his students, she also had that quality. And so people who have that it factor, who can hold you in the palm of their hand when they're speaking, and you can feel their passion, those are the people to me who feed my spirit and feed my
mm.
passion.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I just have to say Hudson Tuttle had one of the best mustaches in the spiritualist movement. He might win, hands down. I now definitely have to come and visit you because I try to go state to state, finding the resting places for a lot of our pioneers. I'm from Wisconsin originally, right? So Morris Pratt Institute is
Okay.
literally like 20 miles away from me. And his tombstone, actually, or headstone, I don't know what the correct word is, actually has right on it scientific spiritualist.
Oh, how interesting.
So cool, right?
Yeah.
So cool. So the Tuttles, like, yes, I have to just say, and then Coons, you're right. That's huge. That trumpet mediumship. Again, there's books about all of them. So, people get into this, and your Estelle Roberts. Oh, Gordon Higginson. Amazing, amazing work he did. Amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So, okay, anyways, let's get back because I was going to say, so tell me, well, let me ask you this, like with, with Estelle, because you said you really admired her mediumship. Is there anything particular that stands out? Does it mirror you in a way? Like, again, I know we're all different, but is there something that you find how she works with spirit? You kind of work with spirit that way?
I would be so lucky. Um, I could only pray that I unfold in that direction. Honestly, to me, it was just, I really think it was the versatility. I think that, back in the old day, before cell phone and TikTok and all these sorts of things, people got together and they sat in the home circle. And
Mm.
today, a lot of people seem to get to this point where it's like, okay, I can conduct a sitting. I've reached the pinnacle. And it's like, look at these people. Look what they accomplished. Look, the trance, the physical, the all of the phases, all of the gifts of the spirit, because they never stopped.
Right.
They realized that development is forever. And they didn't get comfortable and sort of sit on their or their loins. So I admire the tenacity. I admire the versatility. And a lot of the older mediums too faced a lot of persecution. And we're lucky that we live in a society and a world today where, we're not ousted from our communities or tried in the Witchcraft Act like Helen Duncan or things like
Yeah.
that because they paved the way for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's our job, I think, personally, again, soapbox, you're getting me all excited. It's our jobs as spiritualists. Again, it's our choice. We choose to be a spiritualist. Like I choose a label, and I understand labels are only important in the human world, but I choose that label of a spiritualist to explain to people what I do, what I believe, how it works, those kinds of things. Again, they always say spiritualism isn't about conversion, it's about conviction. And
Mm.
that idea of like, here, what you just said questions ago when we talked about, okay, here's my life. Here's mediumship demonstration that prove life is continuous. Now what? Now I got to
Yes.
look at myself because I'm more than just this body. I'm a soul. And what does that mean? And what is, and it really opens Pandora's box. And I think that we have to start, speaking up and talking our truth more and not be worried about the conviction that we might get or the blowback that we might get from others. Like you said, we do live in a very freeing time compared to when the spiritualist movement started. But I also think we're becoming quieter, not louder.
I agree.
That's my opinion on that. But anyways, getting off that soapbox and moving forward. Tell me what you like to do. Are you teaching? Are you reading? Like what involvement are you doing? If you do readings, do you mentor people? That kind of stuff. What kind of activities or do you do to help with the spiritualist movement?
Yeah, so I do sittings and I do um, spiritual healing and stuff like that, but I've really slowed down a lot. And I think that kind of in the COVID period, I think myself and a lot of people, not even outside of this kind of world, realized just how burnout they were. And it
Yeah.
caused me to really contemplate the sustainability of the speed that I was, or the how many plates I was spinning, that sort of thing. So I
Yeah.
cut pretty much my workload by half, and it was probably the best decision I ever made. So I still do in-person sessions, but I stopped doing Zoom stuff and I stopped doing phone readings. And um, I still do my sittings and stuff, but honestly, I'm the happiest and I feel like I'm the most alignment in my purpose when I'm teaching.
Mhm.
Um, because I love seeing people, even people who have no experience whatsoever, and knowing that, not that this is the motivation for it, but it's like 100 years from now, you're not going to know who you touched and how you touched and what they become and who they touch. And, it's a legacy. And I want to know that I left this world leaving something good behind. And while sittings and sessions are wonderful because there's always a need for healing, or there's always a need for guidance or clarity, I think that the teaching has such a ripple effect.
Yeah.
And so that teaching and writing are like my two happy places.
Ooh, writing. Travis, do you have books?
I have and they're on Amazon, but yeah, I have 3 books.
Talk about it. Talk about it. Talk it.
So the first one was called I Am Psychic, So Are You. Um, and I was very young and it was my very first book, but it's still it's a very like bare bones, kind of like a workbook for intuitive development. Uh,
Okay.
and then the second one, which is my favorite, I call Practical Mediumship. And because I have very strong opinions on development and what's proper
Yes.
and what's improper, and mistakes that I've made that I don't want, some people to have to go through. So that's probably the book that I'm most proud of. And the last book, I would say, if anything made you want to buy these books, wait on the last one because I'm totally revising it.
Okay.
But it's a book on spirit guides, and that one was just called Guidance from Spirit.
Oh, wonderful. I have to say, spirit guides are kind of being left out, I feel like, more and more. I remember when I first started, especially in the spiritualist movement, it was always about having your teachers down here on the earth plane, but also utilizing your teachers on the other side. And I've noticed lately that there's been a little like people are kind of skipping that step, and I think it's so important. So I'm glad to hear that you're writing a book on that. And what about a suggestion? Of course, I'll suggest your books first, but what books in like that you've read that have really moved you that maybe other people might be interested in?
I think so. These books, I think, should be required reading for
Oh, I
spiritualists.
love this. I love this.
We talked about Hudson Tuttle,
Mm,
his book Mediumship and Its Laws,
yes.
Arthur Finley, On the Edge of the Etheric,
Oh, yeah.
anything from the Silver Birch Philosophy and This is Spiritualism by Maurice Barbanel. Um, there's a book, I believe it's Brian Bowles, called Letters to a Young Medium that I thought was very inspiring. And I actually just read a newer one not long ago that I was really surprised by the profoundness of it, which was um, Magician to Mystic. And it's all
Brian,
about, yeah, yep,
yeah, Brian
Simon James
Robertson and
and Brian
Simon
Robertson.
James or
Yep,
something. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yep,
yeah.
phenomenal book.
I have not read that one yet. I have heard all of the other ones, and actually, you nailed mediumship and natural laws. I'm a natural law, spiritual law freak. Anything that says natural law on it, I'm reading it because
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh my gosh. And so that is absolutely a staple. Fantastic, fantastic. So, Travis, let me ask, where do you see? Oh, first, I want to rewind. I actually really appreciate your honesty and your integrity about telling people that you got to know you, and you got to know when to slow down, you got to know when to reconnect. I used to sit, like, just like we were talking about Estelle, they used to sit every day, like it was, they always made time for spirit. And I have found sometimes in my life you get caught up, and yes, you may work with spirit, delivering messages, sittings, those kinds of things, but are you sitting for yourself with spirit? And I think the integrity of a medium is someone who can say, you know what, I got to back up. I can't do it this way anymore because I need to do it this way. There's so much respect for that. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. It was refreshing to hear.
Thank you.
That being said, where do you think the spiritualist movement is, going? Or should go? Let's just say that, right there. It's a hot box question.
Honestly, it worries me. One of the things that I really believe is that we have to be willing to be critical of ourselves if we want modern spiritualism as we know it to survive, because like you said, there is this shrinking that's taking place. Some things are, I think, more obvious than others. So you had mentioned the age demographic, and if we want a continuation of this, there has to be people my age, your age, younger than my age to come in. One of the problems is that religion is at an all-time low worldwide, and the younger generations don't care for the pews and the hymn books and that sort of thing. So we have to find a way to modernize a bit and appeal to different demographics and different generations. And we've done this a little bit. COVID was really interesting because it could have been the death blow, and yet we started to see churches and organizations move to online, which I was really proud of, because normally spiritualists tend to resist technology and being up on the times.
Yes, they do.
So we have to find ways with outreach. The other thing is, money is always a problem with organizations. We have to have money to operate, but at the same time, a lot of times people would rather be entertained than have genuine spiritual experiences. And I think that sometimes that opens the door to things that are surfacey or lacking, or sometimes downright silly and fraudulent. But it's also like, the shiny new Ghostbuster from the TV show is going to get more butts in the seats than the old lady who's the phenomenal trance medium who wants to talk to you about her story. So there's lots of different things, I think. And part of that too is it's caused, I think, some of the standards and quality of the mediumship that is out there to drop, because, we want to make money and we want to sustain a community or a church or whatever. So we do classes, but then people aren't walking away with the understanding of, hey, this takes a lot of that inner work. They're like, oh, I took this class, I got this piece of paper, so now I can hang my shingle. And then you have a bunch of people doing that, and they're like, oh, see, mediums aren't that great. So I think the way in which we teach has to kind of evolve a little bit too, or at least making sure people walk away with the understanding of, like, this is just the beginning.
Yeah. And I have to say, Travis, I think that, sorry, let me fix my microphone here for a minute. I also think that what you were saying is predominantly important too. Like, we have to teach the lifestyle. Like, mediumship, when it first started, has been around forever. Modern American spiritualism, or mediumship in the modern spiritualism world, it was there to prove the continuity. Moses Hall said it best when he said mediumship was all religions, with maybe the exception of atheism, right? All believe in an afterlife. Mediumship and spiritualism were to prove the afterlife, not to become necessarily a church pew sitting type of religion. But the lifestyle back then was different. And I think we should focus more on centers, societies, groups of people coming together. And when you have that and they start to understand the philosophy more, when you sing in the garden, it's not like, oh my God, that's an old Christian song and it's all about Jesus. It becomes like, well, he walks with me. Who walks with me? My grandfather, my father? Yeah, sure. Anybody in spirit. My spirit guide walks with me. It opens that, a sense of understanding, a bigger perspective. So I agree with you. I think that we have to look at, and I say this because I look at some of my sisters who are, I was going to say they're in their 20s. Now they're in their 30s. They're going to like me saying they're in their 20s. where, time is busy, like you said, just why you had to slow down, right? We live in a very fast paced world. And, it took you a long time to realize, hey, I got to slow down. And we have to help teach these people as teachers, as spiritualists, we have to help teach them, hey, you can slow down. Let's try some of this and let's try to incorporate that. Yeah, you bring up the two major points that I feel are like the thorns in our sides.
And one of the words that you used, I 1000% agree with, which is centers. I look at sort of our cousin Spiritism. And when you look at France and Brazil and things like that, they have Spiritist centers, and it is more philosophy, way of life oriented. And they still are pretty active and pretty successful. So I think, Hudson Tuttle, the Lyceum movement, if it was more, we had a little bit more of that, that could definitely be a good thing.
I know I read so much about histories of camps, and obviously now owning a coffee house in Lilydale, I'm surrounded in Lilydale, Wisconsin. I was obsessed with Wanawalk, being, from that area, and obsessed with so many of those camps, because camps and state associations formed well before even national organizations formed, even before churches started forming. And they were that collective space for people to come together, discuss, feel, have theories, have debates, look at all, like you said, Lyceum, thought exchanges, debates in the hall, like, Moses Hall debating whoever about whatever, and, spirit trance, that those messages are profound, deep, moving, impactful for our soul. I'm not saying a reading couldn't be, but if you're not ready to do the work, or you don't know how, like, at least be open to doing the work. You don't need to know how to do the work. Spiritualism and its philosophy will help guide you. That's how I felt. Like, I'm still being guided every day. But you got to be willing to be open to that. And we do have to bend. I was just saying, and I'm sure some of my listeners, I probably said, Stacy, you said this already on a podcast, but in reality, we have more generations living than any other time period, right? So it's easily 5 generations. There are people who know their great grandparents and some of their great great grandparents, because we're living longer. We're, all of this. And so that means we have 5 different generations of opinions, beliefs, theories, and you can't expect them all to go one to one or the other. You have to come to the table with balance in the middle, right? The biggest natural law that I'm fighting, balance, the law of balance. Oh, Travis, this has been so enlightening. I cannot stand it. And I would love to keep you on and our listeners and ask 800 more questions if you need, but I do want to thank you for coming on the show. And is there any last minute suggestions you might have to somebody who is on their journey in spiritualism, maybe has questions about spiritualism, like any last minute words you might want to share with any of our listeners?
Well, I think if you can find an elder, someone, whether they grew up in it or whatever, but because those generations are getting older, if you have that access, soak up their knowledge. You don't have to agree with it, but have it there as a reference. But also the other thing too is, we talked about the importance of sitting. And I would, if people always say, I can't find a circle or that sort of thing. And I always tell people, it's like in the Bible when it says 2 or more gather in my name, you don't even need the 2 or more. The spirit world, if they see you putting that effort forward, are going to do more for you than someone who's just, well, I don't know, spirit, just drop the golden book down in front of my face. Just sit. Ask spirit to show you the way, ask them to help you with your development, ask them to help you sort of unfold and nurture the potentials that are in you. And I always say when I sit, because is everyone supposed to be a demonstrating medium? No. Sometimes the most important thing that you can do for your own soul and spirit is to let your guides, let spirit develop you as they will. And maybe you're supposed to be a healer. Or maybe you're supposed to be the person who notices that the neighbors kids are home alone and you cook them dinner, or there's so many different ways that we can be an instrument for spirit. So don't really get locked into a rigid idea of what that's supposed to look like.
Ah, beautiful, beautiful. All right, folks, as a reminder, this is a pre-recorded show, but Travis or myself will look at the comments on Facebook and try to answer. But if you have a question, either, for me or for Travis, how can our audience or our listeners find you?
So my website is just psychictravissanders.com. You could stalk me on Instagram. I will warn you, my posts are very spiritualist. My stories are very unhinged. So just keep that in mind if you
I
follow
am an
me.
Instagram stalker, so I say do it, do it,
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah, and I am on Facebook, though. Just be careful on Facebook. It's just, I believe, .com/Travis the Spiritualist, but there are a lot of copycat accounts, and I know that every spiritual practitioner is dealing with that. So just make sure you have the real me if you do the Facebook route.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Travis, for your time. Talking, like I said, I might have to have you back. We might have to really dive into one thing and just go for it. Cause I feel like if we were in the same place, we'd be talking for hours. Some amazing, great advice and great perspectives into being a spiritualist. And thank you, listeners. I'd like to remind you that Who Are These Spiritualists airs the fourth Sunday of every month. If you yourself are a spiritualist and want to share your story, reach out to me. Also, a reminder, Lilydale Radio has YouTube now too. So we stream to YouTube, we stream to Facebook, and there's numerous shows to see throughout the week. So you definitely want to take a look at all the different radio or blog shows or I don't even know what you call them these days. Interviews that are up, and we check that out. Our season, Lilydale season, starts June 21st, so we're really excited to have that starting. And we look forward to seeing you next month on Who Are These Spiritualists. So everyone, thanks for coming.
Thank you.